What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Super E46 here, and tonight I'm going to be giving you all the tips on how to do an engine flush the proper way without damaging your engine and adding the most life to it. So let's get into it. This is a 5-step process. So step number 1 is going to be where you're going to remove the coil packs and the spark plugs. Once you do that, you're going to take your seafoam and you're gonna pour it in each cylinder, okay? Then, and I'll have a video of me doing some of this stuff as well. So after you pour it in the cylinder, each cylinder that is, you're gonna let it soak, and you wanna let it soak for at least 24 hours. Now, if you don't, now you can get away with not letting it soak for 24 hours, but you have to listen to this part carefully. If you try to crank the vehicle up before that seafoam has evaporated, and if you try to crank it with spark plugs in there, you run the risk of potentially hydrolocking your engine and losing all compression every cylinder. So I know this from experience because I almost did that. So the trick you want to do is, if you are going to crank up the vehicle before the seafoam has evaporated, you're going to want to make sure you crank it with no spark plugs in any of the cylinders. And what will happen is the pistons will push out all that excess liquid. So that's the first few steps. Next step is going to be, you're actually going to pour some of that seafoam in through the engine oil cap with the oil. That's going to help thin out the oil, okay? So I think at this point we're on about step number 3. Step number 4 is going to be similar, so let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the first things you're going to need, as you can see here, I'm using Liquid Moly's Pro-Line engine flush solution. That stuff worked really good last time, so I'm gonna do it again. So basically the first thing you're gonna wanna do on this job is you're gonna wanna take your spark plugs out so you can go ahead and start actually soaking your pistons. And I'm not gonna use that to soak my pistons. I'm gonna use this huge thing of seafoam that I have here, and you can see seafoam motor treatment for gas and diesel, cleans injectors, blah, blah, blah. And it says there, lube upper cylinders. So we're gonna be using that stuff. And I still have some stuff that I need to pick up tomorrow. So this is the night before the job. So what we're gonna do tonight is just soak. That's when I say soak cylinders. You wanna at least do it for like overnight, because if you put that stuff in there and try to crank it up, chances are your vehicle's not gonna crank. So you're gonna let that seafoam soak on there overnight, and then tomorrow we're gonna go in and we're gonna start the car. We'll do the whole engine flush cycle. So let's go ahead and get started, get these pistons soaked. All right, first thing you're gonna wanna do before you actually start doing anything on the car is unplug your negative battery terminal, because you are gonna be unplugging your coil packs. So you just wanna be careful of that. Doing the engine flush is you wanna get access to your coil packs so you can take those out and get to your spark plugs. Of course, before you do all that, you got to remove your engine cover, and before you do that, you got to remove your cabin air filter, the cabin air filter holder, and then your engine cover. You really don't have to remove this one. I'm just taking this off because I'm gonna be also doing a oil filter change from there. Let's go ahead and get these coil packs out. All right, guys, so once you get your engine cover off, all that stuff I was talking about earlier, get access to your coil packs. I'm just gonna start taking them out one by one. They're usually not too hard. Sometimes they get stuck, but you just pull them from underneath there, and it should just pop open just like that. Once it pops out, you're able to, goes out all the way, pull that cable out, boom. There's different coil packs for different vehicles, but that's how you do it on most E46s. So let's get these coil packs out so we can get to the spark plugs. All right, so now that we got all of our coil packs unplugged, we're gonna pull them out, and sometimes they're kind of stuck, so you almost have to kind of twist them and work their way out. Like so. You just wanna be careful, because these things are expensive. Just like that. There you have it. We'll go ahead and get the rest of them out, and then we'll go ahead and get those spark plugs. All right, coil packs are out. Let's go ahead and get to those spark plugs so we can start pouring that seafoam into the cylinder head. All right, so we've gotten a few of these out, and if you look closely, it's kind of hard to tell on the camera. Here we go. quite a bit of carbon buildup, and that's after I kind of like moved a little bit of it off. So they don't look terrible, but you can see they don't look great. So we're gonna replace those spark plugs as well. But we will have to put these back in before we put the new ones in if we don't want to ruin the new ones. All right, so we got all 6 of the spark plugs out. Now we're gonna pour in our seafoam, AKA cylinder lubricant. All right guys, so we've got all of our spark plugs out. Now we're gonna pour in our seafoam, AKA cylinder lubricant. Sorry, it's getting late. I'm gonna prep it tonight. Like I said, you wanna make sure you let this sit overnight. And of course, I'll show you guys. But yeah, let's get into it. All right guys, so we got our seafoam cylinder lubricant here. And so we're gonna pour this into each of these spark plug holes. Of course, you're gonna need a funnel. I recommend you use a gas funnel, just because, you know, funnel used for gasoline, just because if you're using something that's had oil in it, chances of contamination are higher. So you're literally just gonna take the funnel, put it in the spark plug hole, and you're gonna pour in the lubricant. I recommend pouring in about a cup in each cylinder, and you're gonna let this soak overnight. There's cylinder 1, and we're gonna do the rest of the cylinders. All right, you can see we got each cylinder filled up with it, some more than others. As you can see, I poured way too much in that one, but we're gonna let this sit overnight. You wanna make sure these are covered with something, just in case, you know, bug, insect, mouse, something tries to crawl in there. You don't want it to get inside your engine. All right, so we're gonna let that sit overnight, and then tomorrow we're gonna crank it up, flush the engine. All right, so we got everything put in there. You know, we got our cylinder grease, lube, if you will. So I'm just gonna take a t-shirt. I'm just gonna plug up the cylinders with it, just to kind of cover my bases there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we're just gonna make sure that each cylinder hole is at least covered. Mainly for rodents and bugs and just debris. All right, so we got those covered. See you guys tomorrow. So here we are, we're back again next morning, and you can see, looks like all of the seafoam has dissipated. So now you can go ahead and start with the rest of the engine flush. Now, unfortunately, I just realized I forgot my oil filter at the store. So I really don't want to drive the car after putting all this in here, because it's usually good to crank it and let it run, but typically I wouldn't recommend you actually driving it. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to drive it. It's a really short distance, so we should be good there. But basically what I'm gonna do is drive it, bring it back here, and then we'll get started on the actual engine flush. All right, here we are at step number 4. One of the most important steps is you're gonna take your Liqui-Moly Pro Line engine flush, and then we're gonna pour this in the oil cap as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, there you have it, cap removed. Then we're going to pour all that all over the engine. Just kidding. You wanna get every single drop you can inside the engine. That was for y'all's entertainment. I was filming and trying to pour it in there at the same time, watching through the camera. So it didn't work out too well. I didn't spill too much. Just a little bit right there. No big deal. No big deal. So we're gonna let that pour out, the rest in there. So just to kind of catch you guys up, we've got seafoam that is soaked in there on the pistons. And of course we've let that soak, cranked it with no spark plugs, made sure all the excess was out. We also poured seafoam into the engine oil cap, as well as this Liqui-Moly Pro engine line. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna crank the vehicle and we're gonna let it run for about, I'd say probably 30 or so minutes. And of course, you're gonna have to put your old spark plugs back in to do that. So we're gonna crank it back up, let it run for about 25, 30 minutes. Just let it get warmed up, let it thin out all the oil, and then we're going to release all that oil. Okay, so that'll be it. All right, so now we're gonna put our old spark plugs back in, and I'm sure you're probably wondering, well, why would you do that? Well, if you put your brand new spark plugs in, all that sea foam that we just put in there, all the buildup is gonna contaminate your new spark plug. So you might as well crank it up with the old spark plugs, let it run for 25 to 35 minutes. Then that's when you're gonna cut it off, drain the oil, and then we're gonna take out the old spark plugs, replace them with the new ones. So all right, we got our spark plugs back in. Now time to get those coil packs back in, and then we'll be able to crank it up, let it run for about 25, 30 minutes. Got the retrieve the bottle. Let's take a look at what it says. It says, after adding the product, allow the engine to idle for 10 to 15 minutes depending on the degree of contamination. So in that case, I've got a fan and everything, mine will stay cool. I'm gonna let it run for, I'm saying 25 minutes, 25 to 30 I think will be perfect. I know. Go ahead and let her crank. This run for about 25 minutes, let it free all that gunk up, and then we're gonna drain the oil. And of course, the best way to drain the oil is you're gonna take out your dipstick, your oil filter, etc., so that everything just kind of drains out. Getting a little bit of smoke from the headers. I did clean them, so that could be what that is. I like all that smoke I'm seeing. So here we are, 25 minutes. There you can see the mileage. And let's go ahead and shut her down. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna try to get to that oil drain plug as soon as you can, with, you know, because it's gonna be hot. But as soon as you can put your hands on it without it burning you, go ahead and release that oil drain plug. Take your oil dipstick out, oil cap off, oil filter off, etc., so it can really drain all that oil out. And then once you've drained all the oil out, then you're gonna run that chaser, the cheap oil. All right, guys, so when I say chaser, just to clarify so that you guys understand what I'm talking about, when your oil cap is off, oil filter is off, oil dipstick's out, and you're letting the oil drain out, you're gonna notice that this is just me, you know, doing the engine flush multiple times, noticing that this happens, is you're gonna notice that the oil drains out for a long time. It doesn't just drain out for like 5-10 minutes. Oftentimes it drains out for like an hour. At least that's what I noticed in my case. So when I say you're gonna need a chaser, if you wanna really do it the most thorough way, you're gonna want it like the cheapest, heaviest oil you can to run through the actual crankcase right here. So you're actually gonna pour in while the oil is draining out, you know, from doing your engine flush. You're gonna wanna buy the cheapest, thickest oil you can find, and you're gonna run it in here so that it chases all the oil out of the bottom of the oil pan. And I'm sure some of you think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, the oil that's in the bottom of your oil pan from that engine flush is going to be very thin, and you don't want to contaminate brand new oil when you're doing an oil change like that. So you want to get as much of that out of your oil pan as possible so that you get the longest life out of your oil change. That's what I mean by chaser. If you don't have that, it should be fine. But let's go ahead and drain out that oil and see what it looks like. Well, that oil is like water, as you can see, and it's overflowing like crazy. Everybody, engine flush is done. Let all the oil drip out. And so now we're going to put in some new spark plugs, put in our anti-friction, and then our liquid moly green stuff, and then that'll be it. Slide this bad boy on, just like so. Slide that in, and you can do it vice versa, either way. Some people like to take the filter out, slide it on there, boom, there you have it. Of course, after you get your filter seated in there, you want to pour a little bit of oil on top of it. All right, now that we've got our oil completely drained out and all that stuff, engine completely flushed, I added 5 quarts of liquid moly, a 5W40 moly gem. Reasons because I went with the 5W40 because it tends to burn a little bit more oil, so I go with the thicker stuff during the summer. So we're getting a little bit warmer, so that's why I do that now. Since I added a little bit of that, I'm going to kind of wash it down with some of this MOS2 anti-friction. Liquid moly says there's no need to use this if you're using the moly gen, but I feel like why not add a little bit more ceramic coat to the inside of the engine. Put it in there just right, locks in place. We'll let that empty itself out, and then, and of course I replaced the oil filter as well. Once that empties out, we're going to top it off with some of this moly gen. It's hard to see because I can't fit it between. There we go, some liquid moly gen, and we'll be done. Add some new add some new laser spark plugs and that'll be it. Nothing left to do. That's all I got for the engine flush. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, drive safe.